The letter from Grimrose Institute arrived inside a velvet coffined black envelope that smelled faintly of rain and old ink. It said I was invited. It meant I was contained. After 3 expulsions, one due to the unfortunate incident with a biology lab skeleton that learned to waltz, the headmistress of Grimrose had requested me like a museum requests a cursed artifact, with admiration and tongs. I am Morwenna Grey, though most people simplify to Wren, the way crows simplify language into what matters. I collect silences, not quiet, not hush. Silences. There are different breeds if you listen. The brittle silence before confession, the plush silence under snow, the iron-flavored silence that follows, we need to talk. I hear things inside them the way other people hear melodies. It's less a gift and more a bad hobby. Grimrose sat on a cliff shouldering a black lake, all soot-colored stone and indulgent gargoyles. The carriage dropped me at wrought iron gates grown with thorns that resembled signatures. The sign read Grimrose Institute for the Peculiarly Gifted and Tasteful, menacing serif. Rain stitched itself across the sky. I took it as applause. Headmistress Maudlin Crow greeted me in a hall full of trophies with too many teeth. Her hair was a silver storm and her smile had an alibi. "Ms. Grey," she said, "welcome. We cherish talent that other schools misplace." "Cherish is a strong word," I said. "You can start with contain. Work up." Her smile widened. "Containment is for things with edges. You seem atmospheric." She handed me a brass key shaped like an arrow and escorted me past portraits that tracked me with eyes unbothered by death. She narrated as we walked, as headmistresses do. Houses named for extinct birds, auk, dodo, passenger, ivory. A greenhouse of carnivorous peonies, do not nap there. A chapel that refused to host weddings, it finds optimism gauche. A library that rearranged its shelves for readers who lied to themselves. "You'll be in Passenger House," she said. "You'll like the view." Passenger House was black timber and glass and a crooked weather vane that pointed toward mischief. My roommate was already there. Poppy Solace, freckles like spilled cinnamon, sweaters the color of sherbet. One dimple she used irresponsibly, and the sort of warmth that made radiators feel redundant. "Hi," she said, as if exclamation points were edible. "I'm pyrokinetic but responsibly. Touch the kettle and it boils. Touch homework and it crisps." "Wren," I said, "I animate silences. They tell me secrets. And sometimes people." She blinked, delighted rather than afraid. "Bestie," she announced to the room, to fate, to whatever filed paperwork for friendship. On my desk lay the standard Grimrose packet. Schedule, map, 4 demerit slips to pre-sign, and a black enamel pin shaped like a 6-petaled flower. "Wear this," said a note in tiny, prickly handwriting. "It tells the gargoyles you're under warranty." I unpacked 3 black dresses, boots that could outrun shame, a notebook with a spine of sewing pins, and a box containing the only honest thing I owned, my brother's old compass. It didn't point north, it pointed toward inconvenient truths. He drowned in a lake no one ever found. I kept the compass like an argument I refused to lose. Orientation resembled a séance with better catering. We signed the code of conduct: no resurrecting founders without permission, no summoning storms indoors, no kissing in the bell tower during lightning. We toured classrooms with stained glass windows depicting extinct saints. A taxidermied crow speared through the heart by a knitting needle presided over the art room like an omen handmade. At dinner, houses competed for who could look the least impressed. The food was excellent in a medieval way. stews, breads, the occasional suspicious pie. The student body fell into familiar tribes. Hexoc girls with perfect eyeliner and curses that smelled like perfume. Crypt club boys with dirt under their nails and Latin under their tongues. The fencers, who dueled with epigrams sharper than their swords. The boarders, who rode skeletal skateboards down forbidden hallways. Chaotic excellence. Then the lights blinked, the air thinned, and a hush iced the room. The kind of silence that snaps back if you touch it. It tasted of old stone and wet wool and hospital corridors. I closed my eyes and listened. Words lived inside it like minnows. Dead, door, hollow, bring the sixth, a low scrape, as if something with too many knuckles repositioned itself under the floor. When I opened my eyes, everyone else was already gossiping again, pinning the flicker on bad wiring and the dessert flambe. Poppy mouthed, "Lighter?" and set her spoon on fire to make me smile. I didn't. Later, in bed, the silence returned and sat on my chest like a cat with opinions. I let it in. It showed me the concrete corridor under the school, the door riveted shut with iron sigils and the shadow pacing behind it. Then it turned me toward the mirror above our dresser. For a heartbeat, the mirror reflected the room 3 seconds in the future. Poppy's hair flared as if wind moved through it. My compass needle swung to aim at my own throat. I got up, pinned a note to my pillow, "If abducted, feed my cactus," and went hunting the corridor for my dream. Grimrose at night had a different geometry. Staircases leaned where they hadn't in daylight. Portraits sighed and let their cheekbones relax. A musician practiced scales badly in a far tower. An argument lost its nerve behind a blue door. I followed colder air and tripped the latch on a door that claimed to be a broom closet but smelled like river stones. The corridor waited, concrete and condensation. Pipes hummed like sleeping bees. At the end, a door riveted with iron flowers, the same 6-petaled shape as my pin. Sigils braided the metal, personal, furious, and feminine. I knew the handwriting the way you know your own. My mother's. She had never been to Grimrose. She'd always claimed to be allergic to institutions and orchestras. Yet her sigils, her language of knots and needles, sealed this door. My mother stitched everything: wounds, menus, stories. She stitched protection the way other mothers baked. I put my ear to the steel. Another silence, thick with whale-song sorrow. It breathed against the door and fogged my skin. It said, "Sixth, hollow, hunger, keep me asleep." Boots whispered behind me. I flattened against the wall and watched the headmistress ghost out of the darkness with a lantern held low. She touched the sigil the way you touch an old scar, with inconvenience and love. "Stay sleepy," she said to the door. "The children deserve another season." Then she turned, saw me like a rabbit that had decided to learn lion. We regarded each other for one beat of the school's old heart. "First night," she said. "Already subterranean. Ms. Gray, are you lost?" "No," I said. "I'm precisely found." Her lantern made a small cathedral of light around our shoes. "This door is not coursework." "Then it's extra credit," I said. "What's a hollow? Why 6? She exhaled. "Curiosity is a blade. Handle it. I've been bleeding politely for years." She weighed me with headmistress scales and demerits. "You are not yet part of this concentric circle," she said. "For your own safety, remain outside it." "I'll audit," I said, and smiled the smile I save for people who underestimate me out of habit. Politely. Back in passenger house, Poppy sat up when I slipped in. "Went a haunting without me?" she asked, not offended, just eager. "A door," I said. "And a word. Hollow." Poppy's dimple went away. "Don't collect that silence, Wren," she said softly. "It has teeth. Everything here does. Even me," she said, held up her thumb and made a polite flame. "I roast marshmallows and secrets. I lay awake while the building breathed around us, counting the seconds between thunder and lightning, the heartbeats between questions and answers. The compass on my nightstand spun until the needle pointed at the ceiling. At 2 a.m., something moved above us, pacing. At 3, it knocked twice on the inside of the mirror. I knocked back. The mirror waited, and then, startled, pleased, knocked once in return. I slept like a person sleeping on an uncashed check, and dreamed of a girl in a white coat standing ankle-deep in the lake below the cliff, holding my brother's compass in one hand and a bouquet of 6-petaled iron flowers in the other. She said, "Bring the 6th," in a voice that knew my name before I did. I woke with a plan I would deny having. Plans are contracts with fate, better to flirt. Tomorrow, I would find out what counted as 6, and I would rewrite the contract. Grimrose schedules are designed like puzzles and alibis. Monday. Necrobotany, plants that politely eat carrion. Tuesday. Arcane geometry, protractors with grudges. Wednesday. Ethics of haunting, consent forms for spectral roommates. Thursday. Advanced silence, my favorite. Most students failed for lack of listening. Friday. Fencing and unarmed verbal sparring, swords, comebacks, bandages. Between classes, the school leaked clues the way old roofs leak weather. In the library, the shelf labeled Family Histories AG slid back when I leaned against it, revealing a rung ladder and a wall of boxes. Mine had my surname stitched on the lid in my mother's thread. Inside, a faded photograph of her in Grimrose uniform, hair braided like rope, arms slung around a girl I didn't know. A discipline slip for experimental scrying in the lake during chapel. A detention sheet signed Maudlin Crow. And a fragment of iron petal similar to my pen. So, my mother had lied with unnecessary gusto. She'd studied here. She'd been contained here. She'd been in trouble under this very headmistress. I pocketed the iron petal, which bit my palm like a nervous cat. At breakfast I fed Poppy a summary. She fed me marmalade and raised eyebrows. "We ask the headmistress," she suggested, helpful and doomed. "We interrogate politely later. First I want the 6th. "The what?" "Something under the school wants 6. "6 what?" "6 who?" "6 of us." I scanned the hall. Potential weirdos. A crypt club boy who carried a trowel and a sonnet. Twins with identical scars who spoke only in palindrome. A girl with brass knuckles and a saint's relic on a string. And a bashful violinist whose case sometimes breathed. The choice, however, was not mine. It was already made. At homeroom, a notice appeared on the board, neat and accusatory. Convocation of 6, noon. The House of Needles, attendance compelled by old treaty. Names spelled themselves in ink that smelled like snow. Morwenna Gray, passenger. Poppy Solace, Ock. Ezra Fell, crypt. Lilith Black, dodo. Emir Cade, ivory. Clementine Rue, passenger. Lilith Black turned as her name wrote itself and gave me the sort of smile people use when they plan to own you later. She was Grimrose royalty, granddaughter of donors, owner of sharp earrings, hair that broke rules by existing perfectly. Her entourage made room for the word she carried, black. Names, here, were weather. Clementine Rue looked like a Victorian doll who had learned Krav Maga. Lace collar, bruised knuckles, eyes that never asked permission. Ezra Fell had graves under his nails and wrote Latin hexameters on the backs of receipts. Emir Cade wore white like an insult to laundry. Poppy played with a sugar packet until it ignited politely and murmured, "Oops." At noon we met where the notice told us. A building stitched with scaffolding, Gothic bones showing. On the lintel, the House of Needles. Inside, mannequins wore uniforms from previous centuries, spools of wire and vintage surgical thread rolled in bowls. Portraits of women with thimbles like crowns glowered proudly. The air smelled of starch and antiseptic hope. Headmistress Crow waited with a box the size of a confession. "The treaty requires 6 students when the hollow stirs," she said. "Each from a different house. Each holding a thread we will need to stitch the seal. You've been chosen by senior faculty and merciless tradition." "Chosen or scapegoated?" I asked. "Yes," she said. She opened the box. Inside lay 5 iron flowers like my pen, and 1 space for a missing 6th. Each petal was engraved with a virtue Grimrose apparently approved of. Steadfast, Clementine took it. Willing, Poppy grabbed it, of course. Exact, Ezra, reluctantly, like someone taking a dare. Merciful, Emir, surprised into honesty. Ruthless, Lilith, smiling the smile that suggested she'd been waiting her whole life for permission to be exactly that. The empty slot bore no engraving. I touched it. It warmed and spelled curious before cooling. Side-eye, Lilith muttered, but she didn't argue. "These are not trinkets," the headmistress said. "They're keys and debts. Our founders bound the hollow under the school with a weaving of iron and intention. Every few decades the weave thins. We restitch it, usually without casualties." "Define usually," Emir said. "Not now," Poppy said brightly, as if volume could bully inevitability. "I have embroidery club at 3. "You'll be embroidering reality," Ezra said. "It will count. We trained." Training, here, meant learning each other's edges. I learned Poppy could make a flame the size of a candle or the size of a headache. That Clementine could disarm you with a hairpin in a sentence. That Emir could stop someone mid-punch with nothing but tone. That Ezra knew where bones wanted to live in soil. That Lilith's talent was seeing a second into a person's next decision and using it against them. I let them learn my talent. You can weaponize a silence if you're petty and patient. We practiced in the old gym, under the painted eyes of girls who had done this before and looked furious about the tradition. The headmistress drilled us like a sewing machine, in, through, out, tie. Again, the weave wasn't literal thread, though we used that too. It was actions performed in lockstep, words spoken in chords, breath counted. We were to become a seam. The hollow announced its interest by turning mirrors into doors. First a bathroom mirror swallowed a toothbrush and spit out a nail. Then a chemistry lab mirror drank a beaker and belched blue steam. Then a portrait mirror in the Great Hall showed us eating breakfast 2 days from now while a figure without a face sat at our table wearing my mother's ring. Lilith convened an emergency gossip. "It's hungry," she said. "Hungry things are predictable. We feed it the wrong food." "Like what?" Emir asked. Clementine said, but arranged inconveniently. That night, Grimrose hosted the Mask, a fundraiser disguised as a party disguised as a trap. Alumni returned in gowns that shed rumors. The houses out peacocked each other. A cellist sawed at the moon until it purred. I wore a black dress with sleeves like sarcasm and a mask shaped like an anatomical heart, because I enjoy being on the nose. At 11, the Great Hall extended itself the way a cat stretches. Arches went taller, shadows longer, laughs louder. The mirror over the fireplace blinked. We blinked back. My iron flower trembled at my collarbone, its petals warming like something waking. I walked toward the mirror and the mirror walked toward me. Our reflections misbehaved. Poppy's flame burned blue. Lilith's earrings dripped ink. Ezra's grin sharpened into a Roman coin. Emir's jaw unlocked a word he didn't want to say. Clementine's shadow sprouted extra hands. My eyes looked like places people lose themselves on purpose. I don't like this version of us, Poppy said. Too honest, I agreed. The mirror unfroze and a hand slid out. A slender woman's hand with my mother's ring. I didn't flinch. I had practiced not flinching for years. The hand made a small, weary gesture. Come. Headmistress Crow crossed the room like a warning in heels. Ms. Gray, she said. Ma'am, I said. She asks you, you answer me, Crow said. We keep our hierarchies here. It keeps the hunger honest. Defined, honest, Emir muttered. For Grimrose, the headmistress said, it means, admits intent and cleans up afterward. The Hollow wants to borrow the mask. We must decline without provoking a tantrum. We declined. We failed to avoid the tantrum. The chandeliers exhaled their candles. The room went starless. The smell of wet stone rose like an old argument. Guests screamed, then laughed at themselves, then screamed properly when the mirror began to ripple as if it contained an ocean and we were under it. The Hollow didn't appear as a monster. It arrived the way a migraine does. Rainbow at the edges, hole in the middle. It took absence-shaped bites out of light and conversation. Poppy grabbed my hand, an ember under my skin. Tell me we trained for this, she said. We trained for a different this, I said. But the stitches are the same. We formed up like a habit. 2 in front, Clementine, me. 2 to the flanks, Emir, Ezra. 2 to stitch the back line, Lilith, Poppy. The iron flowers warned. The headmistress stood behind us like a measuring tape across an unruly hem. I listened to the silence inside the scream. There it was, the brittle, electric pause before someone breaks a promise to themselves. The Hollow's silence. I threaded my breath through it and tugged. Through, I said. In, out, tie. We spoke the words we'd memorized in Stitching 101. We moved like we'd done it 1,000 times in someone else's life. The weave held for 1 heartbeat, then 2. The mirror sulked. The room reassembled itself by degrees. The chandeliers remembered how to glow. Then the Hollow did something rude. It spoke in my mother's voice. Morwenna, it said, like a lullaby with a hinge. Bring me the 6th. The 6th what? I said, too fast, too eager, and hated myself for it. It did not answer. The mirror hiccuped and coughed up a small object that skittered across the floor and came to rest against my boot. A compass. My brothers. Everyone heard the sound I made. Headmistress Crow made the same one in a lower key. What does it point to? Poppy whispered. I placed it in my palm. The needle swung and swung, then aimed, not north, not south, but at a person standing across the room wearing a dove-gray suit, a mask shaped like an hourglass, and a posture I knew from the small muscles of grief. My mother. She lifted her hand as if to wave and then, polite and cruel, turned and walked into the mirror that had resumed pretending to be ordinary. The compass needle quivered, then died. Ah, Lilith said. Family drama. The spiciest seasoning. Maudlin, my voice managed. Why did you lie? Headmistress Crow repinned a hair that had escaped and only then answered. Because loyalty is a thread and sometimes it's a tourniquet, she said. Come to my office at dawn. Bring your 6. No one slept. The mask dissolved into the sort of tired laughter that keeps people from crying in public. I sat in the dark on Poppy's bed while she toasted a sugar cube over 2 fingers and told me stories about summer camp because that's how she keeps monsters at a manageable size. At 5, the silence returned and perched on my shoulder. It said, quite gently, "It isn't a number." "What isn't?" "Sixth." "Then what is it?" "A door that looks like a person." "Who?" "You already know. You just don't like the answer." I didn't know, and I'd never liked an answer in my life. Headmistress Crow's office smelled like cedar, ink, and wise rage. Books on the walls in languages that had never fallen in love. A portrait of the founders, 6 women in black holding iron flowers, looking like they'd invented patience and then spent it. A brazier of salt burned in a bowl made from a bell. She gestured us to sit, not like children summoned, but like soldiers debriefing. I appreciated the condescension of respect. "The hollow isn't a creature," she said. "It's a vacancy with appetites. Our founders borrowed a silence from a place under the lake and convinced it to sleep here. It sleeps poorly. Why borrow it at all?" Emir asked. "Because people will always make doors," Crow said. "Better to put a lock on one we can watch." "Who were the founders?" Clementine asked, eyes on the portrait's iron flowers. "Shaw, Cade, Rue, Black, Solace, Crow," she said. "Each house bears one." She let our names land. Poppy's already knew. Clementine's flinched. Emir's swallowed. Lilith's eyes went carnivorous. Ezra wrote something down in Latin he'd pretend later not to translate. I looked at the one name not listed. "Where's Gray?" I asked. Crow's mouth became a second ruler. "Your line didn't bind. Your line unlocked." Poppy set her teacup down so gently the saucer didn't dare complain. "Wren's family made doors," Crow said. "Your mother joined the school believing she could unmake the wrong ones. She met me. We became colleagues." The pause that ate that word had history inside it. She left before graduation when she believed she'd hurt someone she loved. "My brother," I said. "He drowned." "The lake keeps secrets," she said. "We've tried to steal them." The lake finds this amusing. Lilith's earrings clicked. The hollow asked Wren to bring the 6th. If the founders were 6 and one line unbound. "It's not math," Ezra said, voice soft with genuine scholarship. "It's grammar. 6th, as in, the 6th stitch. The knot that finishes the seam." "The door that looks like a person," I said, remembering the silence is grammar. "A finisher. A closer." Crow nodded. "Seams require endings. Grimrose excels at beginnings. We recruit, we polish, we release. Endings are messier. We made the 6th out of students when we had to. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it broke the student." "How many broke?" Clementine asked, not horrified so much as making inventory. "Enough that I ironed my collars on Memorial Days," Crow said, which was not a number but told the truth. "We're not sacrificing Wren," Poppy announced, very bright, very hot. "No one asked for sacrifice," Crow said. "We asked for craft, like hemming a monster," Lilith murmured. "Chic." Before we could decide whether to unionize, the bell tower tolled 13 times, a number that made superstition sit up straight. A student sprinted past the door, face drained of metaphor. Crow went to the window. "Ah," she said, "mirror eaters." No one asked what those were. The name told us, and what it didn't tell us, the hallway did. Glass cracked as if chewed from the inside. Bathroom mirrors bulged and popped like bubblegum. The portrait mirrors in the great hall, which had been sullen, now leered. From each, pale limbs groped outward, thin-wristed, hungry. They moved like reflections that refused choreography. Where the hands touched wood, wood silvered. Where they touched students, students went briefly transparent, as if changed into a sketch of themselves. "They're not after us," Ezra said, listening with his graveyard ears. "They're after the petals." The iron flowers on our collars heated. The mirror eaters weren't monsters so much as mistakes, gaps in the world's self-portrait. The hollow had coughed them up like a body expelling stitches. "Jim," Crow ordered, "we stitch now or we lose framing." She looked at me. "Ms. Gray, you'll lead." "Why?" I said, genuinely curious. "Because hungry things like you," she said. "And because you won't entertain their flattery. Go." We ran the way kids run when they've agreed to be brave together, badly and with style. Poppy sparked a line of small flames along the corridor's edges to herd students away from glass. Emir shouted orders in the tone you used to stop someone from stepping into traffic. People obeyed even if they didn't know why. Clementine acquired a broom, because of course she did, and used it as a quarterstaff in a way that made every broom rethink its purpose. Lilith anticipated a mirror eater's reach by a second and caught its wrist with a loop of iron thread. Ezra sang a single word in Latin that made a bathroom sign remember dignity and shut its door. We burst into the gym. It had been staged for us, 6 iron rings sunk into the floor, 6 lengths of chain, a diagram chalked in circles. Cricket bats leaned against the wall, as if even here Grimrose wished to pretend normalcy with props. We took our places. I stood at the center and felt the room's silence like a heartbeat under my boots. "Through," I said, breath a metronome. "In, out, tie." We moved. We spoke. The iron flowers on our throats hummed a note that braided with my voice and the others until it sounded like a loom aligning. Mirror eaters poured under the gym doors like cold smoke and hesitated. Hesitation is a lever. I pressed it. "Mercy binds," I said, to Amir. He pulled the chain once and we all followed the tug. A mirror eater's arm, not an arm, a suggestion of one, froze and turned into silver lace. "Exactness cuts," I said, to Ezra. He completed the circle with a line drawn in chalk he'd dipped in bone dust. "Steadfastness holds," to Clementine, who braced like a bridge. "Willingness warms," to Poppy, whose flames shaped themselves into a seam iron, pressing ripples flat. "Ruthlessness chooses," to Lilith, who flinched and then did not. "Curiosity closes," to myself, and I did the thing I am least good at, I ended. Not a person, a moment. I caught the silence of choice midair and tied it to the iron and the floor. The gym inhaled, exhaled, and the mirror eaters dissolved like fog learning shame. Applause would have been tacky. Sweat made our collars blush. Crow leaned in the doorway, unreadable as a sealed document. "Acceptable," she said. "Again at dusk. You have hours to eat a sandwich and question your life." We did both. In the cafeteria, someone had made funeral potatoes. We told jokes with elbows. We let adrenaline dress as humor. Then Lilith unfolded a napkin with a flourish and revealed a small square of mirror she'd stolen from the gym. "This," she said, "belongs to our hollow. And it reflects not now, but then." She set it on the table. It showed the gym empty and a girl in a uniform 30 years older than ours standing where I had stood, binding a circle with 5 others. My mother. She was tired beyond sleep, furious beyond volume, and luminous with someone's love. Headmistress Crow, young, mouth brave, tightened the final knot. In the mirror square, on the floor, lay a boy with dark hair and the sort of smile that makes sisters jealous and proud. The boy held a compass. My brother. Poppy closed her hand on mine with a heat that didn't burn. "We find the rest of that scene," she said. "We decide our own ending. We found it in the lake. Night fell inconveniently with perfect theater timing. The lake's surface reflected a sky too generous with stars. The cliff wore its usual sermon about consequences. We went anyway. Ezra brought a spade. Clementine brought rope. Amir brought bread because some cultures insist on feeding monsters first. Lilith brought an attitude that chewed gum. Poppy brought matches and hope. I brought my brother's compass, which pointed into the water. At the shoreline, under the chapel's crooked reflection, the water went colder than physics. It murmured, "Det, door, bring the sixth." Define, bring, I said. In this house we require consent. The lake obeyed the letter of our logic and sent a ripple to our feet that hardened into frost and then into mirror. We looked down. We saw our own bodies, older by disappointments and cleverer by scars, moving through the same motions we were about to invent. The mirror began to dissolve. It wanted us to fall. We did not. Hold, I said, to the silence. It held, resentful. At the far end of the mirror ice, a figure appeared, white coat, iron flowers in a chain, my mother's ring bright. She was walking out of the water as if from a shift at an endless hospital, gentle and late. "Wren," she said, "we don't have time for the long version." "Make time," I said. "My life has contained only long versions." She smiled the way someone does when she recognizes herself in her daughter, and it's an unpleasant relief. "Your brother drowned because I asked him to hold the door," she said. "He let go because he loved you more than instructions. I tried to fix it. Maudlin tried to fix me. The hollow eats beginnings. We need a finisher." "Meaning me," I said. "Meaning the six of you," she said. "I am the seventh stitch." "That's not how seams work," Ezra said, pedantic in a way that made me like him. "In this house," she said, "they do." Behind her, under the water, something rolled in its sleep and showed its spine. Hollows between ribs. Hollows in which we could all fit if we curled. It wasn't a beast, it was a sentence with missing words. "Tomorrow at dusk," my mother said. "Bring your petals. Bring your stubbornness. Bring the idea that endings are not always failures. Meet me at the door under the school. We stitch. You go on. I go under." "No," I said, before thinking. "We come back with you." She touched my cheek, fingers cool as lake logic. "Come back with yourself," she said. "That's harder." The mirror ice softened into water, politely. We turned to leave. Something grabbed my ankle from the reflection and pulled, hard. I kicked. Clementine stabbed the water with an oar she'd produced like a magician. Poppy lit the lake's surface with a film of blue fire. It crackled, impressed with itself. And Amir spoke a single command word that the lake recalled agreeing to centuries ago. It let go. We left a shoe to the water as tithe. It kept it like a souvenir. On shore, Lilith wrung water from the hem of her dress with disdain. "Tomorrow, then," she said. "We save the school, the world, and personal dignity. I'll pencil it between ethics and lunch." "Bring snacks," Poppy said. "I get stitcha when I'm hungry." I looked at the school, lit up like an apology. I looked at my friends, more accurate word than I'd expected to find here. I looked at the iron flower on my collar, at the empty slot inside my chest, and felt the click of an answer I still refused to like. The sixth wasn't me as individual. It was us as a shape. We slept badly. We rose bravely. We went to the door. The corridor under Grimrose had the usual amenities: condensation, regrets, a suspicious draft. Headmistress Crow waited with a toolkit that resembled a traveling altar, spools of iron thread, a bottle of lake salt, 6 needles you could use to sew a flag to the wind, and a 7th heavier needle with my mother's initials engraved on the shaft. Last time we did this, she said, we were arrogant. We believed in permanence. Let's be humbler and more precise. She placed our iron flowers into a circle on the floor, petals outward, as if the seam would have to pass through each of us and cut a little to fit. She handed me the heavy needle. You will stitch. The rest of you will anchor. Poppy heats, Ezra measures, Clementine ties, Emir softens. Lilith chooses where to cut, and you refuse to stop when it hurts. Consent, I said. If I'm about to be a human sewing machine, I require threat-level clarity. You can walk away, she said. We will lose the school by degrees over 10 years, and something worse will wake under some other school that deserves it less. Or you can sew and we can sleep. I have never slept well. I would like to try. My mother stepped out of the door then, hair wet with lake, ring glinting with a light that didn't come from here. She looked older than yesterday and younger than my grief. She kissed my forehead like punctuation. We do this clean, she said. We do not offer blood unless it insists. We do not dramatize. We make art at the scale of survival. The door unlatched itself like a person reluctantly opening to a visitor who brings soup. The hollow breathed, and the iron in my flower arced toward it like two magnets remembering lust. I threaded the needle with iron wire that grated like tiny storms. Poppy warmed it until it glowed a kinder color. Ezra chalked measurements on the floor like a choreographer. Emir spoke the words that make fear unlock its jaw. Clementine held my wrist steady between stitches. Lilith pointed at the places where cutting would hurt now instead of later. Headmistress Crow stood at my shoulder and did nothing, which was also work. We sewed. The stitch ran like a sentence, across the door and through it, binding absence to architecture, hunger to rules. Every time I pushed the needle through, the silence changed flavor. Splintered, melted, pleaded, mocked, bargained. I didn't accept bargains. I've learned the price of those. My mother stood inside the door, within reach and not, hands on the seam from the other side, pulling as I pushed, her ring a small moon. We moved as one thing. The six of us were less a team than a machine built out of insults we had stopped believing about ourselves. Willing, exact, steadfast, merciful, ruthless, curious. We were a grammar. We made a sentence that promised, stay, sleep. We will wake you only for repair, not for feasting. The hollow answered by showing us everything it could eat if we failed. Poppy saw her home, charred to modern. Clementine saw her grandmother's shop turned into a themed bar. Emir saw a hospital corridor with no end. Ezra saw a meadow paved with upgrade. Lilith saw herself ordinary in a mirror that hated her. I saw my brother handing me the compass with both hands and my mother behind him, tired in a way even sleep couldn't fix. I kept sewing. Halfway through, the needle stuck. The hollow had found a knot of its own, something tied around a name. My mother's. It pulled. She steadied herself with a sound I had never heard her make, the sound people make when they choose to hurt correctly. Crow flinched. I understood a lifetime's friendship in the brief crease between her brows. Cut, Lilith said. Now. I cut the knot with the edge of the needle and tied it smaller. We sacrificed a slice of memory to keep the rest. My mother's first wedding ring slipped. A memory took its coat and left, and the seam tightened. Through, I said, sweating into my boots. In, out, tie. The last stitch asked a question I hated. What are you willing to be less of? The hollow takes everything you offer plus a finder's fee. If I offered fear, it would eat my caution. If I offered loneliness, it would eat the part of me that resists belonging. If I offered curiosity, we'd all die. Poppy squeezed my arm until her fingerprints made promises in my skin. Offer the story that says you end alone, she said. It's a bad story. Let it go. Fine, I said to the hollow. I will be less interesting if necessary. It laughed. I stitched. The scene closed. The door sighed. The human sound buildings make when we pretend they're not alive. The iron flowers cooled. The silence settled into something like sleep, not trust. That's enough. My mother leaned her forehead to the seam between the iron petals and the oak. I can hold the knot, she said. This time no one else drowns. No, I said. We practice what we stitched. We don't dramatize. Dramatics are my only vice, she said. Maudlin, tell my daughter I was occasionally tolerable. You were ferocious and wrong, Crow said. My type. Give me a day, I told my mother. A weekend. A Wednesday. Yes, I do enjoy jokes that sound like prophecies. Come back through a crack like guests do. We tell each other stories we regret less. She smiled in that very specific way people do when they forgive you for letting them go. Hold your silences gently, she said. They're full of cowards and braveries both. She stepped back. The scene cooled. The door considered. It closed. We didn't cheer. We pressed our foreheads to our knees and laughed the way you laugh when the alternative is shaking too hard to stand. Poppy lit a match with her teeth and we all yelled at her on reflex. Clementine hugged the broom like a friend. Emir handed out the bread he'd brought and none of us made jokes about communion. Ezra wept openly and translated it into Latin later so it would feel scholarly. Lilith took a selfie with all of us and captioned it, Team Door. Headmistress Crow touched my shoulder. Ms. Gray, she said. You owe me detention for unauthorized heroism. I'll embroider the word contrition very neatly, I said. We climbed back into the part of the school that believes in daylight. Grimrose pretended nothing had happened the way old institutions protect their arteries. The morning announcements included, fencing moved to the south lawn, and, please return the skull named Horace to the anatomy lab. He's late for class. In the great hall, students ate as if chewing were an act of rebellion. The mirror over the fireplace reflected only what it should. Unflatteringly honest. In my reflection, my mother didn't stand behind me. Good. Let the living occupy their own frames. At lunch, Poppy held up my brother's compass. The needle had remembered north. I fixed it, she said, cheeks smudged with ash-like war paint. How? I asked. Stared at it until it complied, she said. That's my talent too. Arya, no, Emir, cleared his throat. There will be another season, he said. These things never end. They pause. We stitched the pause well, Ezra said. Lilith set a 6-petaled iron flower in the middle of the table like a vase. We need a club name, she said. Stitch Witches? Door Choir? The Hemingways? Absolutely not, Clementine said to every option. Fine, Lilith said. We'll workshop. The point is, we saved the school. We deserve cake. Headmistress Crow appeared like a shadow that had learned manners. Cake is in the faculty fridge, she said. Do not make me chase you to retrieve it. We ate the cake. It was excellent. Poppy got frosting on her nose and set it on fire and we all applauded the nose's survival. My iron flower cooled against my skin. The silence in my chest learned to purr. That night, I returned to the mirror in our dorm and knocked once. It knocked back, civil now. I said, I'll let you have my worst hair mornings if you let me keep my best. It seemed a fair treaty. I slept with my compass under my pillow, pointing north like a promise I could hold without bleeding. At dawn, someone, perhaps the lake, left a bouquet of iron flowers on the chapel steps, tied with red thread, 6 petals, and a 7th stitched in with stubborn joy. Season 2, Poppy announced at breakfast, raising her orange juice as if toasting an inevitability with vitamins. We're ready. I believed her, not because endings had gotten easier, but because we had. I kept collecting silences, but I shared their stories now. They sound better in a chorus. And when Grimrose breathed that heavy, old building breath as winter settled on the lake, I breathed back. We fit.